Why They Call Revenge Foolish. A sci-fi story by Julian Winn. Warning: the following story depicts imagery of slight gore, PTSD, and mild swearing. Reader discretion is advised. A fire shot dark ashes and glowing embers into the night. 5 humanoids sat on decaying logs, surrounded by tall pines and dark red grass. 3 of them had pure black skin with bumps littered across, while the other 2 had lighter, tan skin that was smooth. The tallest of the black humanoids adjusted his left arm. Sounds of gears craned as he moved the mechanical limb. All 5 of them wore military camo, the colors that of the grass to help blend in. Discussions filled the night as 3 of them talked with one another, while the tallest and one of the tan-skinned stared silently at another. The tanned woman gripped her rifle, the leather gloves squeaking from the pressure. The tallest finally spoke, spurking as he did.
"What has you riled up, Miss Agatha? You seem murderous. Terrans aren't naturally murderous like bloodthirsties, especially for a new recruit."
His smile widened, showing off his sharp, off-white teeth. Agatha blinked and looked up, staring at the stars covering the night sky. Massive space stations were visible from the planet's surface, some being diamond-shaped, built with crimson metal, while others were circular shapes with a massive pillar connected in the middle. She sighed, looking back down towards the tallest.
"I caught the love of my life in a bed with only Lisbon knows who. I swear when I find that man, I'll gut that little—"
The tallest quickly cut her off, letting out a low chuckle.
"Miss Agatha, no need for such language. I'm sure he had his reasons. However, this sounds a bit like revenge, which I have a tale for a Terran like you to hear. Maybe change your mind about gutting this handsome cheater."
Agatha stared at him incredulously, gripping her rifle tighter. The other tanned humanoid spoke up.
"I really would love to hear about this tale, General Throatstomper. Your people's culture is truly wondrous."
Agatha glared at the man, her other gloved hand flexing into a fist.
"This is not your business, Jason. Stay out of it," she hissed,
causing General Throatstomper to raise his mechanical arm. The other 2 creatures, called bloodthirsties, looked at each other and snickered.
"Mr. Jason, I will gladly tell it. As for you, Miss Agatha, please calm down. Mr. Jason here only wishes to learn, and I shall provide."
Agatha grumbled a few cusses under her breath, while Jason took out his notebook and leaned forward expectantly. General Throatstomper cleared his throat as the group listened in, starting off with a grim voice.
"It all began 50 years ago, which I think was 2068, on a midway world, this world we called M-10. To the Terrans, they called it a lavish plains world. Our political events at the time were quite brutal, with our leader, John Bloodworth, announcing the no mercy policy in the galactic year 2048, wiping out friendly species, Terrans, and so much more. Now going back to the main story, on this planet lived a man named Bob. Bob was a simple human who went to the town near his farm to buy groceries, talked with shopkeepers and fellow civilians, and was just overall a kind person from what the townsfolk said. However, the big thing to remember is what he owned. Chickens. Fat, plump, and healthy chickens. He loved those birds with all his heart, feeding them every day, making sure 0 predators would ever touch them, and kissing their heads goodnight whenever they went to sleep. They were yellow, black, and gray, all with beautiful feathers. Some reported he was originally married, but his husband passed away due to medical issues. A tragic event indeed. I even heard he named one of those birds after him, Bill the Little Chicken. The townsfolk there said if anything happened to those birds, well, he would have gone mad. For 40 long years, he lived a pretty stable life, until my kind found the planet. Now, my kind isn't dumb enough to send drop pods full of perfectly healthy assault class and watch them be ripped apart by a thresher worm because we forgot to scout. Instead, we send down 4 of our highest class ground units and research the planet's features, people, and overall stability. These ground classes weren't just any ordinary soldiers. They were known as Cutlass class, equipped with the best armor, blades, and tools any bloodthirsty soldier could receive. It was one of the highest honors as a ground unit.
Once the safe call was made, we, as in the footwork class, would be sent down to help push the fight and allow our mechs and air support to rain hell on the cities, towns, villages, and anything else that wasn't a bloodthirsty. It was a rainy night as the diamond-shaped scout ship descended like a bullet into the open plains, its ruby-colored armor glittering as the stars fired their light. It landed sideways and expelled its four pointed legs to support itself. A hatch from the side opened soon after, allowing the Cutlass class to exit. An issue arose as the soldiers realized that rations weren't packed within the ship, leading to them practically starving after leaving the vessel. What I find odd was that scout ships always had food available, but perhaps the footwork just forgot to resupply. There was fermented blood, though. Always gotta have our alcohol. Their armor was quite easy to identify, consisting of angled plates across the entire body, perfect connections between joints, and angled helmets with thick wires connecting to the digital collar located around the neck. These helmets were specially designed to reflect high-caliber bullets and completely cover the face, with digital monitors inside the helmet scanning everything ahead of time. They weren't built for stealth, practically shining when traversing in day and night, reflecting the crimson color of their armor. Notice how we really like diamonds and the color red? Anyways, these four were hungry, and rightfully so, which led to them searching for meat due to our carnivorous diet. First thing they saw was the coop, the plump chickens sleeping peacefully on their perches. Directly next to this coop was the home of Bob. Bob awoke with a startle to hear his birds squawking and thunder ripping at the sky, followed by silence. He grabbed his hunting rifle and ran out, searching for whatever attacked. Blood, feathers, and a bright fire in the distance is all he saw. The four Cutlass were sitting in the mud, laughing and cracking jokes while eating murdered chickens with bottles of fermented blood. Their helmets lay forgotten beside them, exposing their black and bumpy skin with mouths filled with yellowish teeth. He stared at the feathers resting in the puddles being formed by the constant pouring, the rain drenching his clothes and mixing the blood with mud. His hands tightened around the hunting rifle, with only one thing filling his mind: hate. One of the Cutlass class noticed him and let out a drunk snicker, grabbing his assault rifle lying in the mud and aiming directly at Bob. A flash of lightning struck the dark sky, followed by blood splattering into the fire. The three others stared at their fallen comrade, watching the dark liquid gush from his forehead. The liquid mixed with the mud as it made contact. They quickly put their helmets on and equipped their assault rifles, looking towards the man who was aiming with only an iron sight. Another flash of lightning. Another shot. The helmet cracked as the bullet pierced perfectly through, lodging itself directly into the soldier's left eye. The digital sensors within the helmets of the two remaining Cutlass class searched frantically, but the intense rain messed up the tracking, something we bloodthirsties would not discover until after the no mercy policy. The sound of boots against mud was suddenly tracked by one of the Cutlass class's helmets. With a jolt of motion, the soldier fired at the tracked location. The sound of flesh ripping followed, but the boots kept moving. With another flash of lightning, the barrel of a hunting rifle came plummeting into the back of the Cutlass class neck, ripping the wires from the helmet. The sound of a rifle firing followed, and another body hit the ground. The last soldier fired near where his comrade fell, trying his best to hit the shadow of a target. A fist suddenly met his helmet from behind, shaking the sensors as another crash of lightning struck. The Cutlass class swung around and slammed the barrel into the killer's chest. Bones cracked at the force, but the man still stood. The soldier fired once. The sound of skin and muscle being hit reverberated, followed by a hand grabbing the soldier's armored glove that held the grip of the gun. A boot slammed into the soldier's chest, causing his grip on the assault rifle to loosen and his armored boots to slip in the mud. The soldier landed with a hard grunt, sliding across the slick grass as another lightning strike illuminated the night. Above him stood a man so full of rage, so hell-bent on killing, that even a soldier designed to kill feared this creature. The creature's fists clenched, proceeding to fall on top of the soldier and ripping off his helmet. Fist after fist slammed into the Cutlass class's face, making him unrecognizable after only a few minutes. The complex assault rifle lay forgotten next to the body, shining as rain washed off the blood that was splattered across it. The man tore the sheath from the soldier's body, inspecting the bloody scimitar within. He attached it to his belt, now moving to the corpse with the cracked helmet. Now, a small detail I forgot to mention when it comes to cutlass armor is that whenever any non-bloodthirsty combatant attempts equipping it, the suit will detect the unfamiliar blood and immediately release spikes from the inside across the entire suit, causing intense internal wounds and crippling movement. However, and I swear I'm not making this up, the creature stripped the armor from one of the Cutlass class's body and began putting it on piece by piece, letting the spikes pierce its body and dig into its muscles. It continued to move like nothing happened, grabbing the helmet with the crack. As the rain fell over its armored body, the helmet was put on, and only a single eye could be seen now, filled with a single goal: to hate. Now, this is where the best character comes into the story. Me. I was a simple footwork class when this began, and I think I was 19? 20? Off topic, my apologies. Now, as a footwork class, most of us get to head straight into the fight, like pushing deep into enemy territory, helping resupply our mechs and larger footwork class groups, and ensure cities fall from our overwhelming forces. However, I was not as lucky, for I was placed as a guard on this planet. A damn guard with one other comrade named Stonebrain. We were stationed at one of the military outposts near the planet's capital, which had not yet fallen due to its intense resistance. Around the major capital stood 4 military cities we had to capture. We had 3 of those 4. Our approximate time until the last military city would fall was around a week, then to the main capital, and then host the grand promotion ceremony like every other planet and get out. I had already set my eyes on being promoted towards a higher ground class, specifically assault. I could already feel my hand sliding across my brand new Crimson's SMG with its drum magazine and blood-cooled barrel. My comrade Stonebrain didn't exactly feel the same way. He personally seemed lazy in my eyes, always slouching at his post or just running off and doing some sort of opposite thing than he was assigned. He would have made a great mechwork class, though. He had a thing for machines and mechs, always fixing them or making a design for one in his free time. 6 days marked the fall of the capital city, and around 24 hours had passed since the creature's move. It was already gaining fame, being nicknamed the Flesh Seeker by high officials. Its impeccable aim with its hunting rifle and its quick work with a scimitar allowed it to shred through not just 1, but 5 whole military outposts within those 24 hours. The only survivors, being some civilian manufacturers, described bullets that rained down seemed to fly off the cutlass armor, and spiked grenades tossed would only dent its armored boots. I would never, in a million years, want to see such a thing. But Stonebrand? Well, let's just say his name described him perfectly.
While I was maintaining position by the front gates, Stonebrain approached me, who was also supposed to be guarding the gates, but decided that was just too much for him. Throne Stomper, my fellow guard, let's get some humor into you, eh? Got some spirit? He asked, smiling with sharp, yellow-stained teeth. My younger years weren't the best humor-wise, considering I never made a joke unless I was a barrel deep on fermented blood. Are you asking me to leave my post? If so, it's a hard no as always, Stonebrain. I spoke bluntly, delivering my usual cold stare. My rifle sat tightly in my grip, the factory-produced maroon wood slightly splintered from the many battles I fought. Stonebrain doubled down, forming a sly smirk instead. I heard the assault class will be there. Elite assault class. They're passing through O3 for the ceremony. That captured military city. Come on, it'll be fun! Stonebrain exclaimed, already walking towards the transport crawler. My excitement from hearing elite assault class marching through slowly pushed me away from my post. After a few more minutes of Stonebrain staring and the opportunity to see what I could be in a few years finally caused me to cave. Fine. One trip.
Only for a few days. We have to be back before the last military city falls. Yeah, whatever, Commander, Stonebrain teased, slowly climbing into the transport collar. I followed close behind, admiring the beauty of such a machine. It wasn't a flashy mech, just a simple transport vessel used to move any kind of soldier from one place to the next. Its basic design consisted of a red diamond cut down the middle on its side, allowing for an open top that was protected with an energy shield for projectiles. On the inside was the driver's seat, and enough room to fit at least 7 other soldiers. Both sides had medium-length, 3-pointed metal legs, which all 6 combined worked together to move the crawler up hills, down roads, and through torched battlefields. Stonebrain sat down in the driver's seat and began flipping a few levers on the command interface, activating both the reactor and steering control. He gripped the side stick and pushed forward, causing the legs to creak and begin moving, like a flesh centipede's, one after another. However, only a few steps in, the crawler began struggling. For Bolt's wrath, Stonebrain mumbled, getting up from the driver's seat and hopping down from the transport crawler. What has occurred? I asked, adjusting the strap holding my bolt-action rifle to my back. I think the reactor's dead. Could you grab me another core? Just one from storage. The weird-looking crystals. You'll know them when you see them. The legs are probably clogged too. I made a small nod and hopped from the crawler, entering the storage building and searching for crystals Stonebrain described. As I searched, I began overhearing a conversation between 2 commander class.
The Flesh Seeker might be coming to help protect 04. If that creature is on the Terran's side, oh my, bold be in our favor.
I bet it kills Terrans too. Not just us. What about the civilians, anyway? Were they hurt?
Not a damn scratch. Don't know how. One even said it protected them. Thought about turning them in for questioning until I heard that the assault class there were going to betray the civilians so they could save their own asses.
What a bunch of cowards. Hey, footwork class, get moving.
The commander class suddenly yelled towards me, noticing my eavesdropping with his maroon eyes. I quickly grabbed the crystal and made a low bow, nodding profusely as I left.
Footwork class needs some common sense to them. Gonna get them killed if they don't.
I heard the same commander class mumble as I left, causing me to walk faster towards Stonebrain. As I returned, the right side of the crawler was opened up, allowing for access to the storage, reactor, and leg joints. Somehow Stonebrain got his hands on a few tools, using a small metal stick to clear out gunk and grime that got cupped deep within the leg's pistons. The reactor located in the middle appeared dead, its usual red glow replaced with a weak gray pulsing. I handed the crystal to Stonebrain, watching him open the circular reactor pod and set the crystal inside. As soon as he closed it, the legs began moving once more, sounding clean as they slammed their pointed ends into the dirt. He lifted the panel back onto the side, bolting it with a gun-looking tool.
Where did you learn to do that? I asked, genuinely impressed by Stonebrain's work. My blood brother. He was a metalwork class. Fixed up all sorts of things, including crawlers.
Stonebrain smiled widely, his ruby eyes watching me. Other footwork class watched as we hopped into the crawler, too focused on the distance booms that an orbital AAC created each shot they fired, or just enjoying the time they had before reinforcements were required at 04. Soon, the crawler made its way through the gates. Open fields entered my vision, full of tall, green grass. Wind constantly swayed it back and forth, moving how footwork class move through the cities, fluid and complex, but all in unison. A few trees were strategically scattered across the lush fields, most likely old from the fire scars across their bark. The transport crawler wasn't moving on any defined road, making small holes behind it as the legs dug into the dirt. I've got to say, this is something I missed about being a footwork class. That feeling of just observing the planet's geography and its many wonders. How a desert world was so different from a jungle world.
That crystal back there almost cost me my service time, I said, breaking the silence.
Thanks for that. I'm not your higher up, you know. Maybe I'm starting to grow on you, Stonebrain teased, focusing on the path ahead.
It hadn't even occurred to me when I was heading to grab the crystal that he was right. But I can't lie, he was beginning to gain my liking. I don't believe so. I'm still just as professional as I am now.
Honestly, professionalism is for boring old military folk. Makes you unapproachable and annoying to be around. That's why if I'm ever a mech lord class, I won't be boring. I'll be the coolest mech lord in bloodthirsty history.
I stared at Stonebrain's display, stifling my laugh. His enthusiasm was truly something else. So full of spirit. We sat in silence for the rest of the way, occasionally broken by my commentation towards a traveling burrow bug or a massive flock of avian creatures. Night approached quickly as our distance to the city shortened, and the sounds of gunfire and cheering were distinct. Stonebrain powered off the transport crawler and hopped from the side. I followed close behind, observing our parking spot. We were on the outskirts of the city, with vegetation already infesting the ruins of many smaller buildings. Rusty Terran guns and decaying bodies were natural to see around these parts, since the inner city was used for manufacturing and living quarters. Flies danced over corpses, landing for the quickest of bites before zooming back into the group, aware of the numerous flesh spiders that crawled nearby. The corpses weren't just soldiers. One body lay motionless against a broken wall, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt. A small mauled beast was picking at their bones, consuming the charred flesh. Stonebrain moved me forward, keeping his rifle flashlight on and pointing it ahead. The sidewalks of the streets were full of civilians, footwork class, and the occasional mechwork class who patrolled, looking out for mechs that may have broken during the parade. Lights filled the night as people held up crimson lanterns and glowing flags. As we made our way through the crowd, I began recognizing familiar faces of other guards from our stationed military base.
See? We weren't the only ones,
Stonebrain whispered to me, moving past a blood woman who was rubbing ointments onto her crimson skin. We soon arrived at the end of the parade, just barely making it to the final step of the ceremony. In the center of the city stood a mighty orbital AAC, which is an abbreviation for Orbital Anti-Air Cannon. Its central barrel stood towering over the buildings, and rumors told that whenever it fired, the very ground beneath you shook. 4 smaller side barrels were lined around it, designed to fire napalm and HE rounds. The many skycutter buildings that the Terrans made were scraped down, now a maximum of 20 stories to allow civilians to easily work and live in. A narrow bridge was built between 2 shortened skycutters in front of the orbital AAC, allowing a high official to stand and speak to the crowd. Stonebrain jabbed my side and pointed towards the dimly lit bridge. Walking across the steel was General Vanecutter, wearing a dark red suit made specially for the occasion. He looked nervous, unnaturally nervous, something most generals either never are or never show. His crimson revolver sat neatly in his belt, and in his clawed hand was the signature detonator. The crowd immediately silenced themselves, awaiting the usual speech for these kinds of occasions.
Soldiers and comrades, today marks the removal of an orbital AAC. One last city stands between us and the Terran capital, and once that orbital AAC falls, we can finally send in our battleships from the void above. However, we rest today. Let us watch this great cannon fall, and rejoice as we claim another planet for the grand, bloodthirsty Empire.
General Vanecutter pressed the button on the detonator, smiling unnaturally wide. Forced. Crimson explosions erupted from the orbital AAC's base, causing each barrel to slowly crack and begin crumbling into the ground, shooting dust and debris into the air. Massive floodlights lit the display, and the ground shook from the force. Civilians in footwork class cheered. The elite assault class from the parade barely looked, too focused on keeping people back as the dust began flooding towards the crowd. However, I wasn't focused on the display.
My crimson eyes were on the general, whose face was barely visible from the darkness. A small light allowed me to see his eyes, focused on the radio he was holding. He was speaking into it. The crumbling was deafening, drowning out any other sound that dared ruin the moment. Suddenly, the general jolted back and fell against the railing, clutching his side. The radio was dangling from his fingers. The crumbling soon came to a stop, and hearing began to return to normal. However, the general was still slouching over the railing, coughing violently as he stared down, eyeing whatever happened to his side. Slow, heavy steps echoed throughout the silent night. The floodlights shut off, leaving everyone in a crimson glow mixing with thick dust from the ceremony.
By the gods, is that the Flesh Seeker?
Stonebrain asked, staring at the figure who was walking towards the general, carrying a hunting rifle in its right armored hand. Stars reflected their light off the red armor, highlighting the angles and plates that made up the chest, arms, and legs. The perfect connections between joints. The angled helmet that reflected high calibers. A single open crack that left the left eye vulnerable. Blood dripped from undergaps in the armor, staining the steel bridge with each step. Civilians in footwork class gasped and pointed, not daring to yell or fire at the creature. The elite assault class immediately drew their SMGs, aiming directly at the armored foe. I was truly speechless, unable to open my mouth. I had no words for such a speculation. With a grunt, the general adjusted his position, moving to face the Flesh Seeker while still holding onto the railing. He set his radio in his suit pocket, immediately going for his revolver as soon as his hand was free. He gripped it tight and shoved the barrel against the Flesh Seeker's armored chest, firing 6 times. Each shot echoed across the night, followed by a low humming, the sound of bomber vessels. In the distance, small orbs of dark red filled the black sky, getting bigger and bigger each second.
You think I'm dumb, Flesh Seeker? You don't think I planned for you? Sacrifices have to be made to kill a greater threat.
General Vanecutter hissed, just loud enough for the crowd to hear. Civilians began panicking as they noticed the humming, quickly moving from the sidewalk towards paths to the outskirts. Footwork and assault class took the lead, helping move groups along while keeping eyes on the growing orbs. The diamond-shaped ships were just barely visible now, the bottom hatch beginning to open as they sped like missiles towards the city. I respected those footwork and assault class. It's a shame it was already too late. The initial shock left everything in slow motion. The smell was unbearable. The sounds were horrid. The constant shoving and pushing left me struggling on the ground, crawling towards Stonebrain to try to find a way out together. Diamond-shaped bombs rained from the night sky, covering the military city with crimson explosions. The same explosions used for the ceremony. I crawled my way over bodies of innocent men and women, all just wanting to watch an enemy weapon fall, only to become victims of our own weapons. Stonebrain was struggling, trying to lift a large steel beam that had fallen on his legs. I quickly stumbled to him and began lifting, slowly but surely heaving it off. I pulled him up and began limping with his arm around my shoulder, looking around the ruins for a way out. In the red fires and awful smoke, I saw a figure. The Flesh Seeker. It was staring at us from the bridge, holding the head of General Vanecutter. The general's body lay torched in the debris below. Its single eye watched me, filled with fury and hatred. I looked back with an equal amount. This was its fault. It was the reason the bombers came. It was the reason so many of my comrades and civilians lay dead around me. It stared for a second longer, then vanished over the bridge and into the smoke. I helped move Stonebrain towards a safe path, slowly making our way towards the outskirts. I smiled in relief as we saw the old rusty ruins so close to escape. However, Lisbon does not appreciate those who cheat death. A sudden explosion behind us launched me forward, sinking a steel rod straight into my leg as I landed. I let out a pained groan, trying to stand and look for Stonebrain. I was too late. Stonebrain was burning under a concrete block. His eyes were cold and empty, and his usual smirk on his face was replaced with a half-open mouth. My mind didn't want to go, but my body forced me to escape, to survive. I soon made it to the safe outskirts, collapsing on my knees and scraping them against the old concrete. My leg burned from the pain, and I felt sick. Every emotion hit at once, ripping holes at my mind. Once a lifetime, a bloodthirsty will sob. It happened to me that horrid night. I awoke in the old streets of the city's outskirts, the yellow star supporting this planet, blinding me with its morning rays. The fires still burned with raging fury, determined to last at least a few weeks. The transport crawler was destroyed as I arrived to its parking location, and even if Stonebrain still lived, he couldn't have fixed it. I decided to walk back to base, my footwork vest tattered and ripped from the numerous fires and debris from last night. The travel took almost the entire day, marking 4.5 days until the last military city's demise. My legs ached, my head pounded, and my hands were numb. I couldn't even enjoy the avians that flocked nearby, hoping for me to suddenly collapse so they could fly to my corpse and feast on my flesh. I could die right there, just letting myself fall under the bright daylight. But why? I couldn't die now. Stonebrain had already fallen, and I won't let myself become a coward like that bitch of a general. I'd live on for Stonebrain. As I stared at the gates to the base, a sense of relief filled me. I was alive. I was going to get my promotion. Who wasn't alive? Kept repeating in my mind as I continued my guard duties. The transport crawler was replaced, but its simple existence in the base still reminded me of him. Bloodthirsties are the most powerful race in all the galaxy, but how come I can't even handle a bit of mental trauma? Commander classes didn't even know what happened at O3. Most thought it was artillery from the Terrans. Only I knew the truth. I was marked as the only survivor. Somehow, every other witness or survivor had died. Perhaps the bombers had cleaned out the city of other survivors? Perhaps the Flesh Seeker tried finding survivors and slaughtered them in cold blood. Well, my questions were soon answered. You'll find out soon enough. Other footwork class would sometimes interrogate me about what occurred, and my answer would be the same as always. It was a Terran artillery attack. The ceremony was cut short. Assault class would laugh my words off, unaware of the truth. Only problem was if I did speak the truth, I would be issued as a traitor for speaking so lowly of a deceased general who died in noble battle. My low class as a footwork would also influence my credibility. Each day ticked by like a doomsday clock. 3 days until the fall. 2 days until the fall. 1 final day until the fall. That final night was a nightmare. Each explosion I heard from the distant city left me wide awake again, and again, and again. I tried drinking myself cold. Not even the fermented blood helped. I was miserable. No one talked to me, and that's how it was before Stonebrain. Now I wished someone would talk to me. He was right. He did grow on me. So I decided to keep him there, letting him grow more and more onto me, like a flesh hoarder collecting corpses to grow thicker branches and longer roots. However, I'd add someone to that corpse pile. Someone real special. Someone who wore armor from a cutlass and caused Stonebrain to die. I'd have my revenge. I finally began to doze off as the thought of it lingered. With a final sharp smile, I fell asleep. It was around noon when the news finally arrived. The final military city had fallen. The television mounted in the corner of the bar showed surveillance from drones of the destruction of the last orbital AAC, this time without a ceremony. At least we learned from that mistake. News still spread about the Flesh Seeker, and its base count was now 23. 23 whole bases full of high-class military personnel destroyed. Never civilian homes, never footwork barracks. Just Cutlass, Shadow Stalkers, Mech Lords, Commanders, Generals, and Head Generals. Always the highest. Footwork class around me speculated the reasons. The most popular theory was it was working with the Terrans, taking out high command and powerful soldiers in order to leave our forces crippled. I personally thought it just did it for the love of the game, enjoying that sweet suffering that it caused. Oh, the lives it ruined for others. It only took 3 days for the capital to fall. With support from battleship classes hovering over military cities, and countless footwork dropping in to help apply pressure, the city's walls began falling one by one. I watched from the television in the bar, still keeping up my drinking addiction I got from the night I couldn't sleep. Armored Terran mechs and artillery tanks were no match against the assault teams with anti-tank rifles and spike grenades that dropped into the city's inner defenses, leading both civilian and soldier casualties into the millions. Strider mechs moved through Terran grunts like a sharpened blade through meat, decimating the front lines and letting footwork class spill in. It was another mech I know Stonebrain would have loved to work on. 4 long and slim metal legs connected to the diamond body, with pointed ends to help climb over all kinds of terrain and plant into the ground when needed. Usually the legs would move in towards itself to avoid exposing a vulnerable position, making a pointed arch with each leg while the ball joint rested at the top. 2 slim metal arms extended from the middle of the body, having serrated claws at the end to slam, grab, and tear through infantry. However, Stonebraid told me of how it's terrible at armored units, such as Terran walkers. I took for granted his constant rambling. He really taught me so much about the bloodthirsty armada that I never thought to look into. My thoughts were interrupted by a woman's voice beside me. 2 fermented glasses, please. Add a bit of liver in one. Her voice was smooth, having a familiarity to it. How a high class speaks. I turned my head to see an arch-flesh mage beside me, her red skin glittering from light seeping in from the window. Most of her body was covered by the usual attire of a blood mage, a maroon robe with light-plated armor underneath that covered the arms, chest, stomach, and legs. On her back held a staff, with an odd, mutated diamond at the top being held by black, twirling wood strands. That was obsidian wood, real fine stuff. "Are you Mr. Throat Stomper?" she asked, glancing at me with gray-colored eyes. Unusual for a bloodthirsty. Perhaps she was a hybrid? Weren't hybrids banned by the no mercy policy? She seemed to catch my staring, letting out a small chuckle. "I am a hybrid, sir. Now please, may you answer my question?" I quickly straightened up, nodding. "I am. What do you need from me?" She took both glasses from the bartender, passing one to me and sipping on the one with drained liver. "Are you a footwork class? The one who survived '03? Her gaze was piercing for such a silky voice. I nodded, attempting an awkward smile. Something Stonebrain used to do. The Archflesh Mage seemed to recognize my smile. "I am, madam. Are you going to kill me? For surviving?" She laughed at my question. "No, not at all. I actually wanted to ask you about someone you saw. The Flesh Seeker, right? You saw him?" I was caught off guard by the question, glancing at the bartender, who was cleaning glasses while staring blankly at the counter. I expected the use of "it" when speaking of that thing. "I did. It murdered the lead general there." She grimaced at my words, sipping on her glass again. "Ugly man he was. The general, I mean. And don't worry, say whatever you want in my presence. I don't bite. Unless you ask." She took another sip, looking at me from over the rim. Her face was monotone, not a hint of serious emotion, just staring with a content expression. I couldn't help but want to talk with her. She seemed natural. Unlike other high-class officials, she actually had a personality.
Thank you, miss. Why do you ask me such questions?
I fiddled with my glass, not taking a sip yet. She seemed to notice my behavior and let out a long sigh, lifting her cloak and showing off her empty belt. I'm not here to kill, torture, or bring you in. I'm just asking you questions. I'm only curious, she reaffirmed. I made a small nod, finally taking a sip.
I apologize for my behavior. I've been struggling with a lot. If I say the wrong things, I know I'm gone.
I understand. It's a fearful time right now. Even for us high class, we still got to be careful of what we say. That's why I always talk with footwork. A lot of you seem to agree with me, and even if you snitch, the commanders won't believe you. Plus, y'all don't care that I'm a hybrid. She smiled again, easing me back into the conversation. I let out a small laugh, finally letting my guard down.
So, what is it you're needing to know, ma'am?
Well, around a day ago, we had a group of surviving civilians from O3 arrive at O1, where I was stationed and have been training my students. They told me about how they had survived, and turns out the Flesh Seeker had carried them from the rubble and sent them in a group with scavenged supplies. My hand tightened around the glass. The Flesh Seeker saving people? Load of Terran shit.
Who told you that? The PTSD-induced survivors?
She eyed my sudden tension, moving her hand over her glass and manipulating her fingers to slowly form the fermented blood into a spiral. They did, Mr. Throatstomper. Have you lost someone from him? From the Flesh Seeker? Why do you call it a he? That thing isn't a damn person or an intelligent creature. All it is some fucked up thing that refuses to die, I hissed, quickly hushing myself as I realized I had just disrespected an arch-flesh mage. I really thought I was dead. Instead, she let out a gentle sigh and formed the fermented blood into a sphere above the glass. A friend?
Yes, ma'am,
I answered quietly. She moved her hand again, shaping the blood into a figure. You think revenge is the best choice? I made a silent nod, careful of speaking now. The figure split in half, now leaving two smaller figures standing still. Then one of them formed a scimitar. Another formed a hunting rifle. They call revenge a fool's game, Mr. Thronestomper. I was once down your same path. The figure with the rifle fired at the one with the scimitar, causing them to explode into static drops of fermented blood. The figure with the rifle seemed to rejoice, putting their arms up and waving them around. However, the static drops formed into a new figure, this time with an SMG. The reason for this is quite simple. It's a cycle that happens again and again and again. Watch. The new figure fired thrice at the other, causing them to explode into static drops again. Then, the static drops formed into a small replica of a Terran walker. It fired its dual Gatling guns at the figure holding the SMG and turned it to static drops. Again, the cycle repeated. I watched with fascination, completely mesmerized by her presentation. I had never seen blood magic used in a way other than defense and offense. It reminded me of calm, energetic magic I've seen in my later years when talking with Terran mages. That smile you wore earlier, it's not yours. However, you can make it yours through healing, not revenge. Don't follow what the high military says you must. Follow what your comrades say you should. Try being a bit less boring, Mr. Throatstomper. With a small smile and a salute, she hopped from her stool and began walking towards the exit, but stopped just as her boots made it to the door. She turned back and threw me a small object. Keep it. A certain someone built it for me. I believe it should be yours. Oh, and be on the lookout for the Flesh Seeker. He may be paying a final visit soon. With those last words, she left. I stared down at my black hands, holding a gray cube. It shifted and contracted in certain places, with a small coin slot at the top. I took out a silver credit and placed it in the slot, watching as it unfolded into a small mech. It was a replica of a Strider mech, with the middle of the body using the silver credit as its support. Perhaps she was right. Be the person he wanted to be, not what the higher-ups tell me to become. That's when a small part of me felt different. A side of me that wanted to joke, that wanted to be unprofessional. I embraced it. The final days of this world began rapidly approaching. With the capital dead and bloodthirsties piling in, the Terrans had no choice but to surrender. However, due to the no mercy policy, not a single lived. It felt odd walking through the destroyed capital with my squad of footwork class. Bodies of soldiers and civilians lined almost every street, with wrecks of Terran mechs and fighter jets still burning. A foxwoman was sitting still in one of the fighter jet cockpits. She looked tired. As we passed, I saw the rest of her, or technically what remained. To cut out the details, let's just say only half of her body was present. I even got a glimpse at the destruction of a Terran war mech, this one specifically called a Siegebreaker. Its massive arms were split open, bleeding circuits and sparks. The dual artillery on its back was sliced off, most likely the first of the weapons to fall during battle. Black stains covered the thick legs, most likely from fire attacks and explosions. The main chassis was already being eaten by workers, chopping away at large wires and holing out its massive reactor core. The entire mech rested against the walls leading to the final inner city, having done its purpose and no longer able to fight for its people. I watched as my comrades laughed and joked with another, pointing at the massive war machine and taunting its sleeping form. If Stonebrain was here, he would have admired it. He'd tell about all the functions of each part, and every single way you could die from it. He would have made an amazing mech lord. Probably one of the coolest. Now he is sleeping like the mech is, never to awake. The courtyard where our promotion would take place looked marvelous. Tiled floors covered the entire area, with a 2-story command center located at the back supported by huge pillars with thick, crimson waterfalls flowing from the top, but not exactly containing water. It was located right on a cliff which led to the deep, sapphire ocean. Cutlass class patrolled the courtyard, with Shadowstalkers waiting in the darkness, hiding their black, lightly layered armor like usual. Even a few Strider mechs were floating around, just ensuring the promotion went smoothly. Within that command center sat the head general, who was watching us from the balcony. As soon as I caught a glimpse of his face, I knew something was off. The way he stared looked unnatural, like he was nervous. The same look the general had on at the ceremony. Perhaps he knew what was coming. Perhaps he knew he couldn't stop it. Perhaps he was denying it, and instead showed hatred instead of fear. The head general was always to stay behind and keep running operations. He had no escape. Near the large doors of the command center was the Archflesh Mage, having a warm smile on and walking towards us as we entered. She had her usual maroon cloak on, but this time she walked with the staff in her hand, letting the N hit the ground with a smooth thump each step. As I stared up behind the command center, I noticed the massive red diamond-shaped warships that filled the sky. 2 fatherships and 1 mothership in the middle, our largest of starships. They looked like huge missiles, just barely inching each minute to eventually ram into the planet. Every promotion had these 3 ships, always waiting amongst the stars to soak in glory and pride. He was watching from the largest of them all. Mr. Bloodworth always was, and he was in for quite the show this promotion. My squad formed themselves side by side and began separating by what they were promoting to. Across from me was the Mechwork class promotion. I kept the gray cube snug in my pocket, clunging it as memories flooded back to that day. They subsided, replaced by memories of our talks, of our happy days. We were tasked to hold out our rifles, which would be replaced by our new weapon. Then we would beam up to the mothership. I watched as my comrades received their own SMGs and saluted the Archflesh Mage with wide, yellow-toothed grins. The Archflesh Mage saluted back each time, smiling with her gray eyes. Then, after a long wait, it was my turn. Rain had begun falling, lowering the visible distance to sea. Cutlass class struggled with their sensors, beaming back to the mothership as they saw their job complete. The Shadow Stalkers had long disappeared, and only a Strider mech remained. The Archflesh Mage adjusted my footwork vest for me, smiling even wider than she was before. She took the last SMG from her back and took my old footwork rifle, replacing it with the new SMG. I clutched it with both hands, feeling the smooth, blood-cooled barrel and observing the drum magazine. You earned it, Assault Man Throwstomper. Now do some good with that weapon. She made a low bow, one of the highest forms of respect from another bloodthirsty, due to exposing the neck and leaving yourself in a killing blow. I made a bow in response and stood back up, slouching my new SMG over my back and preparing to warp. However, a sudden explosion made me stop. I looked towards the distant gates of the capital city, watching as intense smoke rose into the air. Sounds of distant gunfire and more explosions followed. I slowly backed away, accidentally bumping into the Strider mech's middle as it moved, clanging its metal claws together and hearing a muffled laugh from inside. It was gone within seconds, already moving towards the front gates. The Archflesh Mage glanced towards me and smiled. Go meet the General. He wants a word with you. I looked at her with confusion, but still saluted. As I began walking towards the command center, I noticed the head general stumbling through the balcony doors. His face looked pale. I soon reached the doors and looked back, gasping as I saw it. The Flesh Seeker was inside a Strider mech, having ripped out the previous driver and leaving the cockpit open. Its cutlass armor looked worn and was covered in stains. Black markings told of fire. Scratches and dents told of gunfire, blades, and explosions. The crack in its helmet was still the exact same. Its eye was now bloodshot and slightly damaged. It slowly arose from the cockpit and stepped out, unsheathing its scimitar that dripped of rain and crimson. Its hunting rifle rested on its back. The Strider mech collapsed behind it, landing with a loud clank as it collided on its side. Flesh Seeker, you're much scary in person. And a lot cooler, the Archflesh Mage said, making a small, friendly wave. The Flesh Seeker stepped closer, its eye narrowed. She took that as a sign to prepare a small defense, moving her hands toward the liquid flowing from the pillars and slowly forming it in a spiral towards her, gathering it in a controlled puddle in front of her. I took in those civilians from O3 you saved, that military city that was bombed. I was wondering if you could help me with an issue, she asked, keeping her hands up. Her cloak was getting soaked in the rain, while water simply slid off the Flesh Seeker's angled armor. It took another step and made a small nod. Great, very good. In that building over there is the head general. You're looking for him, right? He led those Cutlass class that murdered your chickens? The Flesh Seeker's armored hand clenched. Its eye narrowed farther, the gaze seemingly piercing. I do not insult you. I was just saying I understand the pain. I've also lost something that reminded me of someone deeply. In fact, I almost took your route. Luckily, though, I was saved from that. You, however, was not. I'm sorry, Flesh Seeker. You do not deserve this. The Flesh Seeker began striding towards her, stopping just before the puddle. It looked down, then backed up, then back up. With a sudden jolt of motion, it slammed the armored boot into the puddle, testing her reaction. She didn't attack. I do not wish to fight. I'm a teacher, not a killer. I fear that my students will become the opposite when the head general takes over the school. I know you hate him just as much as you hate me, but end a murderous soul, not shed innocent blood. The Flesh Seeker slowly lowered its scimitar. With a slow nod, it sheathed its sword and looked towards her expectantly. She made a nod and began rising the liquid into a rod, wrapping it around itself many times and slowly glazing and hardening over. The tip of it narrowed into a fine point, creating small indents to form barbs. The newly formed spear clattered to the ground, and the Archflesh Mage made a smile. Thank you, Flesh Seeker. I know Mr. Bloodworth has been watching you. Perhaps with you he'll lift this horrid policy. To Lisbon and her glory, Mr. Bob. She made a salute and disappeared into many red sparks, indicating she had warped. The Flesh Seeker took the spear and began walking with a new purpose: to end things for good. I quickly moved into the command center, stumbling up the stairs with dozens of questions in my mind. The head general's desk sat at the end of the lavish hall, with a nervous-looking bloodthirsty wearing a suit sitting in the chair. Behind him was a large crimson mosaic, the art depicting a Terran being impaled by a bloodthirsty war chief, a spear heading directly into the Terran's chest. An assistant was crouched next to the desk, collecting files from the multiple cabinets. She was a blood human, having a gold ring on her finger. The head general yelped as he noticed me, then let out a cool sigh and ushered me over. I followed his orders, seeing him in a different way from the Archflesh Mage's words. I stationed myself next to the assistant, and just as I straightened up, the doors below slammed open. Slow steps echoed from downstairs, sounding like armored boots. The Flesh Seeker climbed each step, blood dripping from the gaps underneath the armor and staining the expensive carpet. Its armored glove clutched the spear with a death grip. The head general looked at the spear, then to the Flesh Seeker. He smiled weakly, showing off his blackened teeth.
I see you've killed the Archflesh Mage. That's wonderful,
he muttered, gripping something under the table. The Flesh Seeker stood still, staring directly at him.
Is the rumor that you don't kill civilians true?
He asked, moving his arm closer to his assistant. With a sudden movement, the head general grabbed her and spun her around, locking her neck in his arm. He snickered like a crazed man, pressing a handgun to the side of her head. I jumped slightly at the sudden movement, causing the Flesh Seeker to notice me.
Come on, Flesh Seeker! Hit me! Kill her! Take her out too!
He coughed hard after each laugh, the assistant struggling and beginning to cry from fear. I felt frozen, unable to do anything. I saw Stonebrain for a moment, how I couldn't do anything to save him. Then I looked at the Flesh Seeker. It was staring at me. Something in its gaze felt different. Not hatred, just pain. Familiar pain. The same pain I felt when I lost Stonebrain. I remembered the Archflesh Mage's words. Don't be what the head general wanted me to become. Be what Stonebrain wanted from me. Gripping my SMG with all my strength, I slammed the barrel into the head general's side, causing him to stumble back and release the blood woman. The handgun fell from his hand, landing with a clatter against the wall. The Flesh Seeker took his opportunity. The last thing I saw of the head general was a spear flying through his chest, crashing him through the mosaic and landing into the icy depths of the Sapphire Sea. Red pooled where he sank, and soon nothing remained. I helped the assistant from the ground and sent her away, watching as she ran from the courtyard and back into the capital city. Her gold ring was shining in the yellow starlight. I looked towards the Flesh Seeker, knowing that I'd die a traitor when I returned to one of the father ships. It seemed he knew what I was thinking. He unsheathed his scimitar and outreached his free hand. I understood and gave him my arm. With the old medkit in the head general's desk, I was able to easily patch up the stump left behind. The Flesh Seeker ensured I was safe before slowly walking towards the balcony at the front of the office, staring at the mothership resting amongst the stars. Blood dripped from under the armor, pooling into small puddles at his boots. He took off the helmet, tossed it from the railing, and slowly fell to his knees. Each part of him ached. He had done it. He had fulfilled his purpose. His mind and body could finally rest. As the intense adrenaline left him, the Flesh Seeker began to tire. His eyes felt heavy, and the armor on his limbs felt too much to carry. He would die right there, falling into a peaceful sleep. Mr. Bloodworth sure was watching. Everyone was. Surveillance drones caught his death, turning on just as the Flesh Seeker crumbled. His story was a reminder of what happened to someone when revenge fueled them. An endless cycle of death and destruction. He took out 30 entire military bases all within 2 weeks. One death turned into 10, then 100, then 1,000. General Throatstomper leaned back with a grin, watching Jason's vivid writing. His mechanical arm reached into his pocket and pulled out a gray cube, shifting it in his mechanical fingers. Agatha was tending to the fire, listening intently to the tale. The two other bloodthirsties were snoring, already asleep in the red grass. Shortly after the Flesh Seeker died, John Bloodworth revoked the No Mercy policy and instead created the Seeker policy. This ensured that civilians wouldn't be targeted and worlds wouldn't be raided just for fun anymore. It's been that way ever since then, General Throatstomper said, yawning as he began to feel drowsy. This was all amazing work, Mr. Throatstomper. I learned quite a bit about your people's culture. Perhaps tomorrow you can tell me more? Jason asked, causing Agatha to groan. Only thing I've learned is that you're probably gay. You're damn lucky that you're a general. Otherwise, I'd be strangling you right here for fucking my husband, she yelled, echoing through the night while General Throatstomper cackled. Somewhere else, deep within the galaxy, lay a gem. Crimson and red, dark and cloudy, this gem spoke of a word being one of 7. A slim, black, clawed hand took the gem and set it to a wheel with 7 other slots. This particular slot had 4 letters around it. They spelled H-A-T-E.